Save all. Would you come here, please? You call that directing?
That is what I've been calling it for 32 years.
Are there values and dimensions in that scene you haven't begun to hit?
Perhaps they're not the values and dimensions I wish to hit. I could make this scene a climax. I could make every scene in this picture a climax. If I did, I would be a bad director. And I like to think of myself as one of the best. A picture, or climaxes, is like a necklace without a string. It falls apart.
Look, when I want to lecture on the aesthetics of motion pictures, I'll ask for it. And it won't be on my time, and it won't be a cover-up for a shallow and inept interpretation of a great scene. To be a director, you must have imagination.
Whose imagination, Mr. Shields? Yours or mine? You know what you must do, Mr. Shields, so that you'll have it exactly as you want it? You must direct this picture yourself. To direct a picture, a man needs humility. Do you have humility, Mr. Shields?
Film is a disease, Frank Capra said. When it infects your bloodstream, it takes over as the #1 hormone. It plays Iago to your psyche. And as with heroin, the antidote to film is more film.
Very nice.
I guess I'd have to say that when I was growing up in the 40s and 50s, I spent a lot of time in movie theaters. I became obsessed with movies. And at that time, there was nothing really available that I could find written on film except one book, sort of my first film book, although I couldn't really afford to buy it and couldn't find a copy except the only one available from the New York Public Library. I borrowed it from the library repeatedly. It's called A Pictorial History of the Movies by Deems Taylor. And it was a pictorial history of the movies in black and white stills, year by year, up to 1949. The book cast a spell on me, because back then I hadn't seen many of the films shown here in the book. So all I had at my disposal to experience these films were these black and white stills. I'd fantasize about them, and they would play into my dreams, and I was so tempted to steal some of these pictures from the book. It's a terrible urge. After all, it's a book from the public library. Well, I confess, once or twice I did give in to that urge. I remember quite clearly, it was 1946, and I was 4 years old. My mother took me to see King Vidor's Duel in the Sun. Now, I was fanatical about Westerns, and my father usually took me to see them, but this time my mother took me. You see, it had been condemned by the church, Lust in the Dust, they dubbed it. And so I guess she used me as an excuse to see it herself, obviously. From the opening titles alone, I was mesmerized. Bright blasts of deliriously vibrant color, the gunshots, the savage intensity of the music, the burning sun, the overt sexuality. Jennifer Jones was a half-breed servant girl, and Gregory Peck was the villain, a ruthless rancher's son who seduced her. Now, for a child, it was sort of a puzzle. I mean, how could the heroine fall for the villain? It was all quite overpowering. frightening, too. The final duel in the sun, where Jennifer Jones shoots Gregory Peck, was too intense for this 4-year-old. I covered my eyes through most of it. A flawed film, but nevertheless, the hallucinatory quality of the imagery has never weakened for me over the years. It seemed that the two protagonists could only consummate their passion by killing each other.
I guess that does it.
Pearl! Hey, Pearl!
Now, I didn't know it, but in 1946, Hollywood had reached its zenith. 2 decades later, when I embraced filmmaking, the studio system had collapsed and was taken over by giant corporations. It was during the 50s that my passion for films grew and became a vocation. The movies were entering a new era, the era of The Searchers and The Girl Can't Help It, of East of Eden and Blackboard Jungle, of Bigger Than Life and Vertigo. My passion was fueled by all sorts of famous and infamous films, not necessarily the culturally correct ones, films you may never have heard of. The Naked Kiss. Murder by Contract.
Did you get restless?
If I get restless, I exercise. My girl lives in Cleveland.
No, this is not Cleveland.
I don't like pigs.
I do. Human nature.
The Red House.
This is the way it could always be, Jeannie. We don't need anybody else.
The Phoenix City Story.
Ain't you Zeke Ward's kid?
Directors that are sadly forgotten now. Alan Dwan, Samuel Fuller, Phil Carlson, Ida Lupino, Delmer Daves, Andre de Toth, Joseph H. Lewis, Irving Lerner. I mean, over the years, I've discovered many an obscure film, and sometimes they were more inspirational than the prestigious films that were receiving all the attention at the time. But I can only talk to you about what has moved me or intrigued me. I can't really be objective here. I mean, this is like an imaginary museum, and we just can't enter every room, unfortunately, because we just don't have the time. So I'm talking to you about some of the films that colored my dreams, that changed my perceptions, and even my life in some cases. Films that prompted me, for better or for worse, to become a filmmaker myself. Now, as early as I can remember, the key issue for me was, what did it take to be a filmmaker in Hollywood? Even today, I still wonder, what does it take to be a professional or maybe even an artist in Hollywood? Now, how do you survive the constant, the tug-of-war between personal expression and commercial imperatives? What is the price you pay to work in Hollywood? Do you end up with a split personality? Do you make one for them, one for yourself?
How about making ants in your plants of 1941? You can have Bob Hope, Mary Martin.
Maybe Bing Crosby.
Yeah, but dancers.
Maybe Jack Benny and Rochester.
A big name band.
What? Oh, no. I want to make Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
From the beginning, I saw film as a means of self-expression. I was mostly interested in the directors, especially the ones who circumvented the system to get their visions onto the screen.
This the sort of thing you had in mind? Of course, they need freshening up. They've been hanging for quite a while.
I can't get into this thing.
Don't worry.
Sometimes it seemed that everything conspired to prevent them from achieving personal expression.
This may be a problem, unless you get a thinner man.
For there are rules, many rules in Hollywood's power game.
Shoulder pads. Straighten it right out. This'll give you the effect. It'll be good.
A poet or a painter can be a loner, but the American film director has to be, first and foremost, a team player. Most important was the collaboration between the director and the producer. In The Bad and the Beautiful, possibly the best drama about Hollywood's creative battles, Kirk Douglas plays the producer, and Barry Sullivan the director. They both dream of making great films, but for their first project, they have been assigned a low-budget thriller called The Doom of the Catmen.
Look, put 5 men dressed like cats on the screen. What do they look like?
Like 5 men dressed like cats.
When an audience pays to see a picture like this, what do they pay for?
To get the pants scared off them.
And what scares the human race more than any other single thing?
The dark.
Of course. And why? Because the dark has a life of its own. In the dark, all sorts of things come alive.
Suppose we never do show the Catmen. Is that what you're thinking?
Exactly.
No Catmen.
Movies are a medium based on consensus. Now, in the old days, you dealt with moguls and major studios. Today, you have executives and giant corporations instead. But one iron rule remains true. Every decision is shaped by the money men's perception of what the audience wants.
I've told you 100 times I don't want to win awards. Give me pictures that end with a kiss and black ink on the books.
I'll make this picture, Harry, or I'll quit.
It was a time when the producer was the key figure.
I found it and I licked it. I want to produce it so much I can taste it.
He chose the director, he cast the director that he thought would be right for the material which he had directed, acquired, novel, play, original, whatever, and then given the green light, then he would cast the director. That was pretty much the system when I first came into the business.
Jewel in the Sun is a fascinating example. Even an old master like King Vidor, who practically put Hollywood on the map, was not necessarily calling the shots. The major creative force in the film was the producer, David O. Selznick, an obsessive perfectionist who wanted to top his greatest achievement, Gone with the Wind.
The result was a kind of grandiose quality. It was a bit over the top, but to David it was great fun to exaggerate, to heighten. His all-encompassing enthusiasm galvanized everybody. That energy, that sense of playfulness, of rascality, that was Selznick. About 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, when the actors had to go to sleep, David would settle down and rewrite the script, and we'd get different pages the next morning. That didn't always sit too well with the directors, but it was David's picture, it was his baby. King Vidor was directing, but David was overcome by his own enthusiasm at times and began more and more to direct over King's shoulder, and that created considerable tension on the set. Finally leading to the moment when King stood up and told David that he knew what he could do with the picture and walked off. David's enthusiasm overwhelmed him, and William Dieterle finished the picture.
Yes, this is King Vidor. Put him on.
Have you made up your mind, King?
I've made up my mind, Arthur. Get yourself another boy. I'm a director, not a butcher.
Somehow, Vidor survived as an on-again, off-again team player. He even worked again later with Selznick in television. Vidor was probably the most resilient of the film pioneers, one of the few who were able, time and again, to convince the moguls to let him experiment with the medium. Throughout his career, he succeeded in alternating studio assignments, pictures like The Champ and Stella Dallas, with personal projects like Hallelujah, Our Daily Bread, or this most unusual film, The Crowd. MGM's Irving Thalberg agreed to finance it because Vidor had given the studio its greatest success of the silent era, The Big Parade. Sometimes, Vidor was even willing to mortgage his house or gamble his own salary. Somehow, he found a way to do one for the studios, one for himself. Now you have to remember, the Hollywood of the classical era, the 30s and 40s, was based on a powerful, vertically integrated industry. The studios, particularly the five majors, MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, RKO, and Fox, controlled every phase of the process: production, distribution, even exhibition, as they owned their own chains of theaters worldwide. To produce 50 pictures a year, each studio held its stars, its writers, directors, producers, and an army of skilled technicians under long-term contracts. They even cultivated a recognizable style or a look in their films.
MGM was more of a dream world, where everything was idealized and somewhat sentimentalized. And that came, I think, from L.B. Mayer. What he thought was classy. And I think probably Fox was leaned more towards, well, I wouldn't exactly say gritty realism, because they made Betty Grable musicals and ice skating pictures and all kinds of pictures. But I think the things that Zanuck is remembered for are pictures with a social conscience and done with a degree of realism that probably would not be characteristic of MGM.
In those days, I could look at the picture, and if everything was in white silk, MGM. I could look at the picture, and if it's Fred Astaire, RKO, subsequently MGM. Paramount was a little bit all over the place. They did not have the decision, but they did have their own handwriting with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, or with Martin and Lewis, and we knew exactly. We went to the same restaurants. We had our own circle.
Now, if you worked at MGM, you had to adjust to the MGM style, and it was quite different from the Warner Brothers or the Paramount style. If they did not conform to the studio look, the Mavericks were reined in. Some, like Erich von Stroheim, simply refused to be harnessed, and he paid a heavy price. Buster Keaton, very freewheeling, agonized when MGM put him under the yoke of their supervising producers. His genius didn't survive the treatment. On the other hand, those who could work comfortably within the system, they thrived. They came to define their studio's style. Clarence Brown at MGM. Henry King at Fox. Raoul Walsh at Warner Brothers. They were Hollywood pros who rose from the ranks. Most of their lengthy careers were spent under one roof. Take Michael Curtiz, for example. Here he's directing The Charge of the Light Brigade. This guy made no less than 85 films for Warner Brothers, and Casablanca was his 63rd. That's an average of 3 features a year over a period of 28 years. 3 features a year. I mean, think of the incredible opportunities they were given to learn their trade and become a true professional. There were also talents who needed the discipline of the system to blossom. A perfect example was Vincent Minnelli. He knew and often acknowledged that the producer-director dynamic was crucial to the quality and success of a picture. An avant-garde Broadway choreographer, he was lured to Hollywood by producer Arthur Freed and became MGM's resident artist. For 30 years, thanks to sympathetic producers like Freed and later John Houseman, Minnelli had all of the studio's resources at his disposal. The cameras were his brushes and the sound stages his canvas. All that he hated and loved about Hollywood was distilled in the harsh story of the bad and the beautiful. The ambition, the power, the opportunism, and the betrayal. No one was spared, not even the director. Here, Barry Sullivan hears from his ruthless partner what has become of their dream project.
What happened? Didn't he go for Gaucho? Go for him. He had a hemorrhage. The First time a star ever said he'd shine on a hairy pebble.
Kirk Douglas's character was loosely based on several actual producers, among them David Selznick.
The faraway mountain's going to be done just the way we want it. $1 million budget. Location in Veracruz. Von Elstein to direct. Gaucho, Wendy for the girl. Ance Chapman for my cameraman.
Elstein to direct.
Oh, you're taken care of. Harry agreed. It won't be a separate panel, but your name will be on the screen. Assistant to the producer.
Thanks.
Oh, Fred, you know this story better than anyone else. It's your baby. Look, I want you with me on the set all the time. You don't have to talk to Von Elstein. Any ideas you have, you tell me, and I'll tell him.
Thanks again. Well, Elstein to direct.
You always said he was the best in the business.
Sure he is.
Fred, I'd rather hurt you now than kill you off forever. You're just not ready to direct $1 million picture.
But you're ready to produce $1 million picture.
With Von Elstein, I am.
Now, to survive, to master the creative process, each filmmaker had to develop his own strategy. Some, like Frank Capra, Cecil B. DeMille, or Alfred Hitchcock, carved a niche for themselves by excelling in a certain type of story and being identified with it. Their very name became a box office draw. A few even achieved Capra's dream and secured their name above the title.
They had wonderful directors at MGM, but you never heard their name. But you heard about me. I was the enemy of the major studio. I believed in one man, one film. I believed one man should make the film. And I believed the director should be that one man. One man should do it. I didn't give a damn whom, but what the director had the most to do with it. I just couldn't accept art as a committee. I could only accept art as the extension of an individual.
If you haven't got the story, you haven't got anything. Raoul Walsh used to say this. And this is another cardinal rule. The American filmmaker has always been more interested in creating fiction than revealing reality. I mean, early on, the documentary form was discarded or relegated to a marginal status. For better or for worse, the Hollywood director is an entertainer. He's in the business of telling stories. He's therefore saddled with conventions and stereotypes, formulas and cliches, and all these limitations were codified in specific genres. This was the very foundation of the studio system. Audiences loved genre pictures, and the old masters never seemed reluctant to supply them. When John Ford rose in the middle of a tempestuous meeting at the Directors Guild of America in 1950 and introduced himself, this is what he said. He said, "My name is John Ford, and I make westerns." He was not referring to his more honored pictures, such as The Informer, or The Grapes of Wrath, or How Green Was My Valley, or The Quiet Man. I mean, the westerns were what he was most proud of. Or so he may have wanted us to believe. Eventually, film genres would serve to organize assembly line production. Each studio made so many westerns, so many musicals, so many gangster films, and so forth. Edwin S. Porter's The Great Train Robbery. This was one of the first attempts at scripting a story, and fittingly, it was also a western. The first master storyteller of the American screen was D.W. Griffith. His sensibility was steeped in a literary tradition, that of Dickens and Tolstoy, Frank Norris, and Walt Whitman. Yet, while borrowing from 19th century literature, Griffith was forging the new art of the 20th century. He explored the emotional impact of film, and before the outbreak of World War I, he had already delineated nearly every genre, even the gangster film with his short, The Musketeers of Pig Alley.
Any minute now, it may be curtains for Roy Earl.
Genres were never rigid. Creative filmmakers kept stretching their boundaries. This was a classical art, where personal expression was stimulated rather than inhibited by discipline. Take Raoul Walsh, the most gifted apprentice and disciple of Griffith.
What's the idea, you? Get back where you belong.
His strongest films were variations on a few themes and characters. The figure of the sympathetic outlaw, for instance, a rebel in the tradition of Jesse James, inspired him time and again. In High Sierra, you didn't root for the police and the ordinary citizens. You rooted for the gangster.
We don't want
And you knew he was doomed when he became separated from the only person who cared about him, his tarnished angel, Ida Lupino.
Oh, be smart. Just yell up to him and tell him to put his gun away and come down. Otherwise, we'll get him sure.
All right.
Go ahead and yell.
No, I won't.
What's that?
I won't, I tell you.
We'll get him then.
He's gonna die anyway. He'd rather it was this way. Go on, kill him, all of you. Kill him, kill him.
Come down, it's your last chance. Come and get me. There's plenty of you down there.
At the end of his memoirs, Walsh quotes Shakespeare, his constant inspiration. Each man in his time plays many parts. This applies to Walsh himself, but also to his explosive characters. These outcasts were bigger than life. They stood beyond good and evil. Their lust for life was insatiable, even as their actions precipitated their tragic destiny. The world was too small for them, and Walsh would often give them a cosmic battleground. Mount Whitney and the High Sierras. Eight years later, Walsh filmed the same story as a Western, Colorado Territory. Again, he provided his desperado with a wide landscape which dwarfed human figures. This time, the City of the Moon and the Canyon of Death.
Hey, McQueen! You got no chance! Come on down! We'll starve you out!
So dear to the heart of Raoul Walsh was his heroine, now a half-breed outcast, that he gave her as much strength and character as the hero.
You don't want to leave him up there. Buzzard's picking his bones clean. Call him out, and we'll split the 20,000 reward with you.
You might even sense a mystical dimension at the end of the film that clearly transcended any genre limitation. The lost city is like a primitive cathedral. And as he listens to the Navajos chanting in the night, Joel McCrea reflects on his fate and appears to accept it.
Wes! Wes!
Colorado.
Wes, they're coming at you! They found the back way! Come down, Wes! Hurry, Wes! I got horses!
Walsh used some of the same camera angles as in High Sierra, but this time, the messenger of death was a Navajo sharpshooter. And in Colorado Territory, the tragedy was complete. Both protagonists were doomed. Now, to me, the most interesting of these classic genres are the indigenous ones. The Western, which was born on the frontier. The gangster film, which was originated on the East Coast cities. And the musical, which was spawned by Broadway. They remind me of jazz. They allowed for endless, increasingly complex, sometimes perverse variations. And when these variations were played by the masters, they reflected the changing times. They gave you fascinating insights into American culture and the American psyche. You can see how a film genre evolved just by watching three westerns John Ford directed with the same actor, John Wayne. The character of the hero becomes richer, more complex with each decade. The Ringo Kid of Stagecoach
Sorry, no silver cups.
Grew first into the benevolent father figure of She Wore a Yellow Ribbon.
They all put in the hat for it, sir. There's a sentiment on the back of it.
To Captain Brittles from Sea Troop. lest we forget.
Now watch Ford transform John Wayne into the misfit of the searchers. Ethan Edwards returns from years of wandering to discover that his loved ones have been massacred by the Indians.
Another one, huh?
John Wayne's heroic persona has turned dark and obsessive. The physical death of the Indian is not enough. Ethan wants to ensure his spiritual death as well.
This has come a long way before he died, Captain.
Well, Ethan, there's another one you can score up for your brother. Jorgensen!
Why don't you finish the job?
What good did that do you?
Why, what you preach, none. But what that Comanche believes, ain't got no eyes, he can't enter the spirit land. Has to wander forever between the winds. You get it, Reverend. Come on, blanket head.
Gone is the simple black and white morality of the early days. Gone are the old-fashioned values of the seasoned cavalry officer. Now look at Ethan Edwards of The Searchers. The same star, John Wayne. The same location around Monument Valley. The same director, John Ford. But a different character, different attitudes, different conflicts, almost a different country. Ethan Edwards hunts down his niece, abducted and raised by the Indians after the massacre of her parents, because he believes she has been tarnished. Living with Comanches, he insists, is not being alive. Ethan Edwards is actually the most frightening character in the film. After years of searching, when he finally finds Natalie Wood, you don't know whether he's going to kill her or save her.
No, Ethan! No!
Let's go home, Debbie.
This is no happy ending, though. There is no home, no family waiting for Ethan. He is cursed, just as he cursed the dead Comanche. He is a drifter, doomed to wander between the winds. The Western also allowed for elaborate psychological and even Freudian dramas.
Well, Patron. Hang him.
In Anthony Mann's The Furies, the patriarchal cattle baron wants his rebellious daughter to beg him for her lover's life.
You will not humble yourself. This I ask.
While John Ford only alluded to the dark side, Anthony Mann dwelled in it. The proud Mexican chooses to die rather than allow his woman to humiliate herself.
Mas líbranos de todo mal. Amen.
The Furies could have been a Greek tragedy. The powerful story, written by Niven Bush, who was also the author of Duel in the Sun, was actually inspired by Dostoevsky's novel, The Idiot.
One.
The kiss of a good friend.
Till our eyes next meet.
Till then.
Tears a body to see someone you love hurt, doesn't it?
Do you want me to beg? Do you want me on my knees to you for his life?
I'd hang him anyway.
That's what he said.
He did, eh? He always was smart.
But you're not. You're old and you're getting foolish and you've made a mistake. It's me you should have hung. Because now I hate you in the way I didn't know a human could hate. Take a good long look at me, T.C. You won't see me again until the day I take your world away from you.
Nos líbranos de todo mal. Juanito. Juanito. Juanito!
The mythology of the frontier, of a land in perpetual expansion, has given way to greed, vengeance, megalomania, sadistic violence. Anthony Mann's brooding heroes were no saints. Seeking revenge was their obsession, an obsession that would consume and nearly destroy them. Even James Stewart, the all-American hero of Frank Capra's fables, succumbed to outbursts of savage violence. In The Naked Spur, you see him reel in his dead prey. He has become a bounty hunter in order to buy back the ranch stolen from him while he was away fighting in the Civil War.
Cut him loose, Howie!
I'm taking him back! This is what I came after, and now I got it! No partners like I started! He's gonna pay for my land!
It's not dead if you take him back!
They're dead! Finished!
He'll never be dead for you!
I don't care anything about that. The money, that's all I care about. That's all I've ever cared about. Roy, he called the turn. He said, face up to it. All right, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. Maybe I don't fit your ideas of me, but that's the way I am.
Jeff! Hey, Hank! You all drop your guns and come on down.
Bud Boetticher explored the bare essentials of the genre. His style was as simple as his impassive heroes.
The coach, let me see your hands, please.
Deceptively simple.
Put them out there!
The archetypes of the genre were distilled to the point of abstraction. Bullfighting had been Boetticher's first vocation. The choreography of basic human passions was his forte.
What did you do with Hank?
Who's he?
The station man here.
He's over yonder in the well.
And the boy?
He's with him.
In the 7 westerns he made with Randolph Scott, Boetticher always gave precedence to character over action.
Look, you let us go and we'll never breathe a word about this.
I know you won't. You go along with what he said about what's happened here?
If I said yes, you wouldn't believe me.
Yeah, it's dumb even talking about it, even.
Each adventure was a poker game, and the player's complex moves were more important than the avowed goal.
You know what's going to happen to you?
I think so.
You scared?
Yeah.
Well, you're honest about it, I say that for you.
Ouch! Pour yourself a cup of coffee.
In the power play, the hero and the villain were complementary figures. They shared the same loneliness, the same dreams, and even the same ethical code.
Have a seat. Over there.
Somehow, the gentleman and the desperado were fascinated by each other.
You got a wife up on your place, Brandon?
No.
Should have. Ain't right for a man to be alone.
They say that.
Well, I ought to know.
You cook good coffee.
Brendan. Talk.
What about?
Your place. What's it like?
It's not much, not yet anyway.
You got stock on it?
Some.
Work the ground?
I plan to. Yeah.
I'm gonna have me a place someday. I thought about it a lot.
You figure you'll get it this way?
Well, sometimes you don't have a choice.
Don't you?
Now look, Brendan.
Frank!
For decades, the Western genre embellished the reality of the West to make it more interesting. But in the mid-50s, several films started questioning the myth perpetuated by Hollywood. Arthur Penn, for instance, presented Billy the Kid as a juvenile delinquent in search of a father figure. By having a journalist follow the young misfit through his career of crime, Penn suggested how history was distorted even as it was unfolding.
State your name.
Garrett.
Huh? How's that?
Garrett!
Hot Garrett.
Little case of the quick jump.
Somebody gonna get his head clipped off.
Paul Newman portrayed Billy as a suicidal anti-hero who sought his own death.
Sylvia, you help me.
We don't want you.
Neither a vicious killer nor a sympathetic outlaw, Billy was a rebel without a cause.
You help me.
His rage and confusion had more to do with the malaise of adolescence growing up in the 1950s than with the realities of the Old West.
Billy, don't go for your gun. Keep your hands away from your sides. I don't want to kill you.
He's here.
Billy, come to me.
Just when you think that the Western has been exhausted, that there's nowhere else to go with it, something will come along with a new slant on things. It's very exciting when that happens. Well, Unforgiven is a good example of what I mean when you can address a situation. There's a lot of concern in society today about violence and gunplay, and that film, even though it takes place in 1880, it addresses that now. That in order when you are a perpetrator of violence and you get involved in that sort of thing, you rob your soul as well as the person you're committing a violent act against.
In Unforgiven, Eastwood plays a professional killer who has tried to reform and become a farmer. Physically and mentally scarred, he's haunted by his dark and violent past. Judgment Night comes after his best friend has been tortured to death by Sheriff Gene Hackman. There's no glamour in killing anymore. The lawman behaves as badly as the renegade. They are both former gunslingers who've shot people in the back or when they were unarmed.
Who's the fellow who owns this shithole?
I own this establishment. Bought it from Greeley for $1,000.
You better clear out of there.
Yes, sir.
Just hold it right there.
Hold it!
Well, sir, you were a cowardly son of a bitch. You just shot an unarmed man.
Well, he should have armed himself. He's gonna decorate his saloon with my friend.
You'd be William Money out of Missouri. Killer women and children.
That's right. I've killed women and children. Killed just about everything that walks or crawled at one time or another. And I'm here to kill you, little Bill. For what you did to Ned. Boys better move away.
Well, I've always felt that the Western movie is one of the few art forms that Americans can lay claim to. Americans are somewhat masochistic, I must say, about that, because sometimes they can be very blasé about their own art forms, because it doesn't, the grass is always greener, you know. It's easy to look elsewhere when sometimes great art can be right in front of you.
Of course, most American directors never claimed to be artists. They prided themselves on appearing blasé. Holding one's cards close to the vest was a survival strategy. Even an old master like John Ford, it seems, had to wear a mask. Watch how he plays the tight-lipped pro in front of Peter Bogdanovich's camera.
Take one. If more than one take, will there? Shoot.
Mr. Ford, I've noticed that that your view of the West has become increasingly sad and melancholy over the years. I'm comparing, for instance, Wagon Master to The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Have you been aware of that change in mood?
No.
Now that I've pointed out, is there anything you'd like to say about it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
can I ask you what particular element about the Western appealed to you from the beginning?
I wouldn't know.
Would you agree that the point of Fort Apache was that the tradition of the Army was more important than one individual?
Cut.
The gangster film. Another rich genre which allowed filmmakers to dwell on America's fascination with violence and lawlessness.
Only a cold, Chuck.
Hey, Tom, wait a minute. What happened?
Oh, nothing. I just got burned up, that's all.
There's action only if there is danger. This was said by Howard Hawks, who was an authority on both the Western and the gangster film. To stay alive or die, this is our greatest drama. Now, the gangster film predates World War I, as with Griffith's Musketeers of Pig Alley or Raoul Walsh's picture in 1915 called Regeneration, which was shot on location on New York's Lower East Side. Gangsters then were viewed as the victims of a depressed environment. Neighborhood kids growing up on the mean streets. But 10 years later, Prohibition brought about a tide of movies that signaled a tremendous escalation in urban violence. Now, what struck me in Scarface was Howard Hawks' cool and distant objectivity.
That's O'Hara's mom.
He showed Tony Comante, also known as Al Capone, as a vicious, immature, irresponsible character.
Hey, look at it. They got machine guns you can carry. If I had some of them, I could run the whole works in a month. It's more than a minute.
Yet, that world was almost attractive because of its irresponsibility. And that was disturbing. At times, of course, the film was very funny. This is not surprising, as Hawks was as much a master of comedy as a master of action.
Hey, that's swell. Look at little. You can carry it. Come on, let's get out of here.
But at the end of the 30s came a really pivotal film, Raoul Walsh's Roaring Twenties.
Don't you ever say that to me again, do you hear? Never.
This chronicle of the Prohibition era was the last great gangster film before the advent of film noir. It read like a twisted Horatio Alger story. The gangster caricatured the American dream.
Dog and pony joints I've ever worked in. This tops them all.
Never mind, honey, I like you. Well, Happy New Year.
This was the gripping saga of a war hero turned bootlegger and his downfall after the stock market crash. And it was actually the inspiration behind one of my student films, It's Not Just You, Murray. And I'd like to think Goodfellas comes out of the tradition of something as extraordinary as the Roaring Twenties and Scarface.
Drop it.
Daddy!
The gangster had now become a tragic figure. Walsh even dared to end the film on a semi-religious image that evokes a pietà.
He's dead.
Well, who is this guy?
This is Eddie Bob.
What was his business?
He used to be a big shot.
After World War II, the gangster turned into a businessman. The gang was taken over by anonymous corporations.
What a layout.
There's only one way to handle you.
Kill me?
If I have to, yeah.
A guy's got to fight for what's his.
The first film to show the major changes in the underworld was Byron Haskin's underrated I Walk Alone. Burt Lancaster, just out of prison, discovers the new world he's in.
Get him out of here.
He knows all my business. He stays. You and your boys. This isn't the Four Kings. No hiding out behind a steel door and a peephole. This is big business. We deal with banks, lawyers, and a Dun & Bradstreet rating. The world spun right past you, Frankie. In the 20s, you were great. In the 30s, you might have made the switch, but today you're finished. As dead as the headlines the day you went into prison.
Region Associates. Stop trying to dizzy me up. Here. Now, I want simple answers, Dave. No diagrams. Dink's got the full say around here, right?
Yes.
Okay, then.
Except that it's revocable by a vote of the board of directors of Region Associates.
Stop the double talk.
I'm sorry, Frankie.
Just what does Dink own?
In which corporation?
Some films, notably Abraham Polanski's Force of Evil, went even further and painted the whole society as corrupt. The Face of John Garfield, a lawyer for the mob, was a landscape of moral conflicts.
People can be made to talk. Was my phone talking too?
The social body itself was sick. The system's violence became the issue, rather than individual violence. You saw a corrupt world implode before your eyes.
Leo, I arranged with Tucker for you to quit tonight. I'll pay off your investments.
I don't want it, Joe. The money I made in this rotten business is no good for me, Joe. I don't want it back.
The money has no moral opinions.
I find I have, Joe. I find I have. The car was put
Abraham Polanski's dialogue was unusually poetic.
I'm glad you called me, Freddie. I'm glad you thought it over to listen to me. To calm down and listen to me so I can help you. Coffee.
Please, Mr. Morse. All I want is to quit. That's all, nothing else. They won't let me quit, and I want to quit. I'll die if I don't quit.
I'm a man with heart trouble. I die almost every day myself. That's the way I live. It's a silly habit. You know, sometimes you feel as though you're dying. Here. And here. Here. You're dying while you're breathing. Freddie, what have you done? Freddie! What have you done to me?
Take it easy, Pop. You're quick with that, Pop. Come on.
Come on.
It can't take all night. Stand up and walk. Stop him. Stop him. He knows. Kill him. Kill him. He knows me.
Brother, Ben.
You couldn't buck the system. You were indebted to the syndicate for life.
Where's my brother? Where's my brother? Where's my brother? Where's Pico? Where did Pico take my brother?
They were forever using you.
Before the police came.
They even wanted you to sacrifice your own family.
I wanted to find Leo, to see him once more. It was morning by then, dawn. And naturally, I was feeling very bad there as I went down there. I just kept going down and down there. It was like going down to the bottom of the world to find my brother.
This madness culminated in Francis Coppola's The Godfather. As Al Pacino discovered when he came back from World War II, the son had to follow his father's criminal path. When you were Corleone, there was no leaving the outfit. It was an evil family, bound by fear and torn by treachery. But you served it without ever questioning its legitimacy, as though it was your country. American values, family, free enterprise, patriotism became totally twisted. Even individualism was dead. The organization was a state within the state. The gangster a chairman of the board, and crime was a way of life. By the late 60s, the gangster genre had proven so versatile, it could even embrace an avant-garde style. Watch the innovative editing here on John Boorman's Point Blank. The images are literally flashing through Carroll O'Connor's mind as he realizes who Lee Marvin is. A killer who slugged and smashed his way to the top of the organization in a desperate quest to find the man in charge, the man who can simply pay him.
Walker.
You're a very bad man, Walker, a very destructive man. Why do you run around doing things like this? What do you want?
I want my money. I want my 93 grand.
$93,000? You threaten a financial structure like this for $93,000? No, Walker, I don't believe you. What do you really want?
I really want my money.
I want my money. Well, I'm not going to give you any money, and nobody else is. Don't you understand that? Carter!
Who runs things?
Carter and I run things. I run things.
What about Fairfax? Will he pay me?
Fairfax is a man who signs checks.
Cash.
Cash checks. Fairfax isn't going to give you anything. He's finished. Fairfax is dead. He just doesn't know it yet.
Somebody's got to pay.
Now, parallel to the gangster film was the rise of a very different genre, the musical. An interesting coincidence. The harshness of the times, the Depression, colored this most escapist of all film genres. With Busby Berkeley, the genre came into its own. A former dance instructor, Berkeley was the first to realize that a movie musical was totally different from a staged musical. On film, everything was seen through one eye, the camera. In designing his production numbers, he would therefore rely on unusual camera movements and angles. The camera itself would partake in the choreography. Berkeley's ballets could not have existed outside of the movies. They were pure cinematic creations. Berkeley's films were viewed as pure entertainment, but sometimes he applied his wizardry to the grim realities of American life, caught in the grip of the Depression.
Remember my forgotten man? You put a rifle in his hand. You sent him far away. You shouted, hip hooray! But look at him today. Remember my forgotten man. You had him cultivate the land. He walked behind a plow. The sweat fell from his brow. But look at him right now. 'Cause ever since the world began, a woman's got to have a man. Forgetting him, you see, means you're forgetting me.
Always stretching the limits of the musical genre, Berkeley even dared choreograph human tragedies. Berkeley's early musicals at Warner Brothers offered backstage stories whose pacing was not unlike that of the gangster film.
The amateur league on crutches. I'm too nervous. Get on, can't do it.
They were dominated by the figure of the crazed, manic, often embittered Broadway producer.
What do you want to do, boss? Bring up that curtain.
In Footlight Parade, you had James Cagney.
All right, that's you. No.
In 42nd Street, Warner Baxter.
Watch the tempo. Watch it, will you? Come on, get the feet off of the floor. Get them up.
In these times, if you showed any ambition, you either became a gangster or a showbiz performer.
Faster! Come on! Faster, faster!
At least in the fantasy world of Warner Brothers.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! It's brutal! Oh! May I remind you that Pretty Lady's out-of-town opening is not far away? It's been advertised as a musical comedy with dancing! If it isn't asking too much, will you please show me a little? Come on, ready, Jerry? Get into it now, come on!
Broadway offered a metaphor for a desperate, shattered country. Director or chorus girl, your life depended on the show's success. Against all odds, Warner Baxter achieved his dream.
All these directors make me sick. Take Marsh, puts his name all over the program, gets all the credit.
Wasn't the kids like Sawyer, he wouldn't have a show.
You're right.
Yeah, Marsh would probably say he discovered her. Some guys get all the breaks.
But on opening night, he was too drained to enjoy the production's triumph. The show had taken on a life of its own, and the taskmaster's lot, in the end, was solitude.
They're sending me to New York for good, to be head of the New York office of Fenton, Rayburn and Company.
New York? What? New York?
10 years later, Vincent Minnelli's Meet Me in St. Louis was a milestone.
I simply don't believe it.
We'll leave right after Christmas. I thought we'd all like to have Christmas in St. Louis.
First of all, the story didn't have a Broadway setting.
New York is a big city.
It was a memory album set in the Midwest at the turn of the century. Its protagonists were the members of a middle-class household. They did not need to be professional performers. Anyone could sing and dance. They felt like it. Singing and dancing became as natural as breathing or talking. Also, the tunes were designed to further the plot and reveal the characters. They expressed the ebb and flow of personal emotions.
If Santa Claus brings me any toys, I'm taking them with me. I'm taking all my dolls, the dead ones too. I'm taking everything.
Of course you are. I'll help you pack them myself. You don't have to leave anything behind. Except your snow people, of course.
Sometimes they were tinged with bittersweet irony as the family faced an uncertain future in the big city.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. Next year our troubles will be miles away. Oh, have yourself a merry little Christmas now. Tony.
Sweetness and innocence will prevail. But with the explosion of a child's pain and rage, unexpected shadows were suddenly cast on this nostalgic period piece.
Nobody's gonna have them. Not if we're going to New York. I'd rather kill them if we can't take them with us.
Tony, darling, don't cry. You can build other snow people in New York.
You can't do anything like you do in St. Louis.
Oh, no, darling, you're wrong.
The rabbit hunters have his private carrot patch surrounded, and they're closing in. Ah, and what's that sticking up over that bush?
Are you my daddy?
It's, No, I'm just your Uncle Doug.
In the mid-40s, something interesting happened.
Hey, fellas, can I come in?
Darker currents seeped into the musical, as they had in the Western and the gangster film. Even the more conventional musicals hinted at the post-war malaise.
Listen to that fiddle player slap, slaps.
On the surface, My Dream Is Yours had all the trappings of a Doris Day vehicle produced on the Warner Brothers assembly line. It seemed to be pure escapist fare.
Oh, it's so spacious. Peaceful. No sponsors or agents pushing me around.
Just hitch your wagon to me and you'll be a star.
No. Thank you, Gary, but I have too much to do on my own.
My dream is yours.
But the comedy had a bitter edge.
It isn't much to give.
You saw the performers' personal relationships turning sour and being sacrificed to their careers.
So, darling, may I say...
Look, honey, let's have an understanding. 2 careers in one family is one too many. We'll concentrate on mine.
Come on, here he is.
The film made you aware of how difficult or even impossible relationships are between creative people. It was a major influence on my film, New York, New York.
I'm through with spending time.
Doris Day's big break comes when she has to replace Lee Bowman, the popular crooner she loves, who's too drunk to perform on his own national radio show.
You can't go on, you're drunk.
Lee Bowman's character was an egotist who felt threatened by Doris Day's success. In New York, New York, I took that tormented romance and made it the very subject of the film.
My dream is you.
It's a lovely girl. Lovely singer. Handy with a knife, too.
Begins to shine.
The pinnacle of the musical was reached in the early 50s. Again we meet the incomparable Vincent Minnelli. Look at the Bandwagon's final production number, The Girl Hunt Ballet. In this satire of Mickey Spillane's pulp novels, you see the musical borrowing and absorbing the icons of film noir, Private Eyes and Dangerous Sirens. Minnelli's musicals celebrated the triumph of the imaginary over the real. Any aspect of reality, however trivial, could be transformed, stylized, and incorporated into a ballet. The world was a stage, and it belonged to those who could sing and dance. MGM was then the magic factory where producer Arthur Freed nurtured such classics as On the Town, An American in Paris, Singin' in the Rain, It's Always Fair Weather, and of course, The Bandwagon.
He's drunk. How bad? Very. What do you want me to do? Keep him off.
A horse! My kingdom for a horse!
George Cukor's A Star is Born took the genre one step further.
Get a load of Norman Maine, will you?
It gave us Judy Garland as a band singer who becomes a movie star, while James Mason, her mentor, sabotages his career.
But just a few, I promise the boys. Thank you. Hands up.
Actually, the story had been brought to the screen twice before in a non-musical form. The show must go on. That is the performer's first commandment. But Mason's Norman Maine couldn't take it anymore.
That does it, just a few more. That does it.
But you got plenty of time. All right.
He was trapped in the cruel world of make-believe.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, no time.
He couldn't even bear to look at himself.
Are you trying to stop me? Are you trying to stop me going on? Is that it?
These broken mirrors were the first step toward self-destruction.
You want a love that's truly true. You gotta have me go with you. You gotta have me. Why the hold out and me have you sold out? Time you woke up, time you spoke up. This line I'm handing you is not a handout. And the team we need stand up. You wanna live high.
This was not a musical comedy. This was a musical drama about the sad ironies of show business.
Why the hold out? Have you sold out? Time you woke up, time you spoke up. Ooh, you gotta have me go with you. Why the hold out? Have you sold out? Time you woke up, time you spoke up. This line I'm handing you is not a handout. As a team we'd be a stand-up. You wanna live high on a dime. You wanna have two hearts that rhyme. Gotta have me go with you all the time.
In spite of bold attempts by such choreographer-directors as Gene Kelly, Stanley Donen, and Bob Fosse to open up new territories, the musical ceased to exist as a film genre. But the showbiz performer still remains a key figure in musical biographies. Recently, the most exciting effort was probably Bob Fosse's self-portrait, All That Jazz.
Showtime, folks.
The figure of the exhausted entertainer needing open heart surgery would fit right into Busby Berkeley's gallery of hard-driving, hard-drinking, chain-smoking directors.
Cut! You blew it. You forgot your line. At the end of this number, you're supposed to say, what's he supposed to say?
He's supposed to say, I don't want to die, I want to live.
Well, look, if you can't say it, you can't say it. We'll just have to cut it, that's all. Cut it. Take me up. Next setup.
Of course, it's not enough for American directors to be just storytellers. So as we continue our journey in parts 2 and 3, I'd like to show you how I think they need also to be illusionists, sometimes smugglers, and even at times iconoclasts. That is, if they intend to express their own personal vision.